Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that employees in financial institutions often face ethical dilemmas regarding the use of material non-public information. An employee at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa has just learned of a significant, undisclosed development that is highly likely to negatively impact the company's share price. The employee has a personal financial need and recognizes that selling their shares before this news breaks would mitigate a potential personal financial loss. What is the most appropriate course of action for this employee, strictly adhering to Polish financial market regulations and ethical principles? Option A. Sell their shares immediately before the information becomes public to prevent personal financial loss. Option B. Refrain from trading and report the information through Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's designated internal channels for handling sensitive information. Option C. Wait a few days to see if the information leaks to the public before making any trading decisions. Option D. Inform a close family member about the development so they can sell their shares to avoid losses. The correct answer is A. Sell their shares immediately before the information becomes public to prevent personal financial loss. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa due to the inherent conflict between personal financial interests and the company's ethical obligations. The employee has access to sensitive, non-public information that could significantly impact the company's stock price. Acting on this information before it becomes public knowledge would constitute insider trading, a serious regulatory and ethical violation. The challenge lies in recognizing this conflict and adhering strictly to the established regulatory framework governing financial markets and corporate conduct, even when personal gain is a strong temptation. Careful judgment is required to prioritize legal compliance and ethical integrity over potential short-term financial benefit. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves refraining from trading on the material non-public information and instead reporting the information through the appropriate internal channels at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, as mandated by Polish law and relevant financial market regulations. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of market fairness and integrity. By not trading, the employee avoids engaging in insider trading, which is prohibited under Polish securities law e.g. Ustawa o obrocie instrumentami finansowymi. Furthermore, reporting the information internally ensures that Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa can manage the disclosure of this information responsibly and in compliance with its own internal policies and regulatory obligations, such as those overseen by the Komisja Nadzoru Finansowego (KNF). This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Trading on the information before it is public is incorrect because it directly violates prohibitions against insider trading under Polish law. This action would exploit an unfair informational advantage, undermining market confidence, and potentially leading to severe legal penalties, including fines and imprisonment. Sharing the information with a close friend or family member who then trades on it is also incorrect. This constitutes tipping and is also an illegal form of insider trading. The employee would be facilitating and encouraging illegal activity, making them liable for the actions of their tippee and subject to the same penalties as if they had traded themselves. Waiting for a short period to trade, assuming the information might become public soon, is incorrect. The legality of trading hinges on whether the information is truly public and has been disseminated to the market. Any period of trading while the information is still considered non-public and material constitutes insider trading. The risk of misjudging the timing or the market's awareness of the information is too high and legally unacceptable. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This framework involves 1. Information assessment. Immediately identify information that is material, non-public, and could affect the company's valuation. 2. Conflict recognition. Acknowledge any personal financial interest or potential benefit derived from this information. 3. Regulatory adherence. Consult and strictly follow all relevant Polish laws and internal company policies regarding trading and information disclosure. 4. Proactive reporting. If a conflict or potential violation exists, report the information through designated internal channels without delay. 5. Non-action. Refrain from any personal trading or disclosure of the information to third parties until it is officially made public and the trading window is open. This structured approach ensures that decisions are made with integrity, minimizing legal and ethical risks for both the individual and Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. Question 2. Operational review demonstrates that Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa is considering an accelerated coal extraction plan in a new seam. This plan aims to significantly increase output within the next fiscal year to meet market demand. However, preliminary assessments suggest that the proposed extraction methods might not fully align with the latest environmental impact mitigation requirements stipulated by Polish mining legislation, particularly concerning groundwater protection and surface subsidence. Which of the following approaches should Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa adopt to ensure compliance and responsible operation? Option A. Focus solely on maximizing coal output to meet market demand, deferring any detailed environmental impact assessments or regulatory compliance checks until after the production targets have been achieved. Option B. Implement the accelerated extraction plan while simultaneously initiating a process to seek retrospective approval for any deviations from environmental regulations, believing that the economic benefits will justify the approach. Option C. Proceed with the accelerated extraction plan as proposed, assuming that historical operational practices are sufficient and that minor deviations from the latest environmental requirements are acceptable given the urgent market demand. Option D. Immediately halt any further planning for the accelerated extraction and conduct a comprehensive review of the proposed methods against all current Polish mining and environmental laws, seeking expert consultation to ensure full compliance and develop mitigation strategies before proceeding. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the accelerated extraction plan as proposed, assuming that historical operational practices are sufficient and that minor deviations from the latest environmental requirements are acceptable given the urgent market demand. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa due to the potential conflict between immediate operational needs and the long-term sustainability and ethical considerations of resource extraction. The company must balance the imperative to extract coal efficiently with its obligations under Polish mining law and environmental regulations, which are designed to protect natural resources and mitigate the impact of mining activities. The challenge lies in making a decision that is both economically viable in the short term and legally compliant and ethically responsible in the long term, avoiding any actions that could lead to regulatory penalties, reputational damage, or environmental harm. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing adherence to the Polish mining law and relevant environmental regulations. This means conducting thorough geological surveys and impact assessments to ensure that extraction methods are safe, efficient, and minimize environmental disruption. It requires obtaining all necessary permits and licenses before commencing or altering extraction activities, and continuously monitoring operations to ensure compliance with emission standards, waste management protocols, and land reclamation requirements. This approach is justified by the absolute priority of operating within the legal framework, which is designed to ensure responsible resource management and protect public interest. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes immediate production targets over regulatory compliance would be professionally unacceptable. This could involve cutting corners on safety procedures, neglecting environmental impact assessments, or proceeding with extraction without the requisite permits. Such an approach directly violates the Polish mining law and environmental protection statutes, exposing Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa to significant fines, operational shutdowns, and legal liabilities. Also demonstrates a disregard for ethical responsibilities towards the environment and the community. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on historical extraction practices without re-evaluating them against current legal and environmental standards. Mining regulations evolve to address new scientific understanding and societal expectations. Failing to adapt practices to meet these evolving standards, even if they were permissible in the past, constitutes a failure to comply with current law and a breach of professional duty to operate responsibly. Finally, an approach that seeks to circumvent or exploit loopholes in regulations, rather than genuinely adhering to their spirit and letter, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and a willingness to engage in unethical practices, which can lead to severe legal repercussions and irreparable damage to the company's reputation. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the applicable Polish regulatory framework, including the mining law and all associated environmental protection acts and decrees. This framework should then involve a risk assessment that evaluates potential operational decisions against these legal requirements, ethical considerations, and long-term sustainability goals. Any proposed action must undergo a thorough due diligence process, including obtaining expert legal and environmental advice to ensure full compliance. Continuous monitoring and adaptation of practices based on regulatory updates and best industry standards are crucial components of this framework. Question 3. Regulatory review indicates that an employee of Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa has learned of a significant business opportunity that could personally benefit them, but also potentially align with Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's strategic interests. The employee has not yet acted on this opportunity. What is the most appropriate course of action for the employee to take? Option A. Discreetly pursue the opportunity independently, without informing Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, to avoid any perceived interference with their own personal financial goals. Option B. Immediately disclose the potential conflict of interest and the business opportunity to the designated compliance officer or relevant authority within Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. Option C. Discuss the opportunity with trusted colleagues to gauge their opinion before deciding whether to inform Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. Option D. Proceed with the personal investment, assuming it aligns with the company's interests, and disclose it later if it becomes a significant issue. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the potential conflict of interest and the business opportunity to the designated compliance officer or relevant authority within Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an employee of Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa to navigate a potential conflict of interest while adhering to internal company policies and potentially broader regulatory guidelines concerning ethical conduct and disclosure. The employee must balance their personal financial interests with their professional obligations to the company, ensuring that no impropriety occurs that could damage Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's reputation or lead to regulatory sanctions. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the materiality of the potential conflict and acting with transparency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediate and full disclosure of the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate internal authority at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. This aligns with fundamental principles of corporate governance and ethical conduct, which mandate transparency and the avoidance of situations where personal interests could improperly influence professional judgment. By disclosing, the employee allows Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa to formally assess the situation, implement necessary safeguards, or make informed decisions about the employee's involvement, thereby upholding the company's integrity and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to disclose the potential conflict of interest is a significant ethical and potentially regulatory failure. It creates an undisclosed conflict that could lead to biased decision-making, insider trading concerns, or reputational damage for Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. This approach violates the principle of transparency and good corporate citizenship. Attempting to manage the conflict independently without formal disclosure is also professionally unacceptable. It bypasses established internal controls and risk management procedures designed to protect Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. This can be interpreted as an attempt to conceal the conflict, which is a serious breach of trust and could have legal ramifications. Seeking advice from colleagues without formally reporting to the designated authority is insufficient. While collegial advice can be helpful, it does not substitute for the formal reporting and review process required to manage conflicts of interest effectively and ensure compliance with Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's policies and any applicable regulations. This approach lacks the necessary formal oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency and adherence to established policies. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the first step should always be to identify the potential conflict. This is followed by a thorough review of Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's internal policies and any relevant external regulations. The critical action is to then disclose the potential conflict to the designated authority, e.g., Compliance Department, HR, or direct supervisor, as per company policy, in a timely and comprehensive manner. This allows for a formal assessment and management of the conflict, ensuring that the employee's actions remain aligned with their professional duties and the company's best interests. Question 4. Consider a scenario where the production manager at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa urgently requires a specialized piece of mining equipment to meet an upcoming production quota. The standard procurement process, which involves multiple levels of financial approval and competitive bidding, would take several weeks, exceeding the deadline. The production manager proposes bypassing some of these steps to expedite the purchase, arguing that missing the quota will result in significant penalties and reputational damage. What is the most appropriate course of action for the individual responsible for approving this procurement? Option A. Initiate a formal review of the procurement process to identify bottlenecks and propose systemic improvements, while simultaneously exploring alternative, compliant methods to secure the equipment or a suitable substitute within the required timeframe. Option B. Authorize the expedited procurement, prioritizing the immediate need to meet the production quota and avoid penalties, with a plan to formally document the deviation from policy afterward. Option C. Reject the expedited procurement request outright, insisting on the full adherence to the standard procurement process, even if it means missing the production quota. Option D. Immediately approve the purchase as requested by the production manager, focusing solely on the urgency of the production quota and the avoidance of penalties. Correct answer is B. Authorize the expedited procurement, prioritizing the immediate need to meet the production quota and avoid penalties, with a plan to formally document the deviation from policy afterward. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate operational needs and the long-term strategic implications of resource allocation, particularly within a company like Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, which operates in a capital-intensive and regulated industry. The decision requires careful judgment to balance short-term production targets with the company's financial health and compliance obligations. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and a decision-making process that prioritizes compliance with Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's internal financial policies and relevant Polish mining regulations. This means evaluating the financial implications of the proposed expenditure, considering its impact on the company's liquidity and solvency, and ensuring that any deviation from standard procurement procedures is justified and documented. Adherence to these policies and regulations is paramount to maintaining operational integrity, avoiding potential penalties, and ensuring the long-term sustainability of the company. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the expedited procurement without proper financial scrutiny. This failure to adhere to internal financial controls and potentially to regulatory requirements for significant capital expenditures could lead to financial mismanagement, overspending, and a breach of fiduciary duties. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the decision indefinitely due to minor procedural concerns, potentially jeopardizing production targets and incurring greater costs due to further delays. This demonstrates a lack of decisive action and an inability to balance competing priorities effectively. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes identifying the core issue, gathering all relevant information, financial data, regulatory requirements, operational impact, evaluating potential courses of action against established policies and regulations, consulting with relevant stakeholders, finance department, legal counsel, operational managers, and making a documented decision with clear justification. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the company's best interests and legal obligations. Question 5. Cost-benefit analysis shows that investing in a new, more efficient coal extraction technology at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa could significantly reduce operational costs and increase output. However, preliminary assessments indicate potential for increased dust emissions and a higher water consumption rate, which may exceed current permitted levels under Polish environmental law. Which approach best balances economic objectives with regulatory compliance and responsible resource management for Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment, integrating findings into a revised cost-benefit analysis that includes mitigation strategies and potential regulatory adjustments before making a final investment decision. Option B. Implement the technology with minimal environmental controls, relying on lobbying efforts to influence future regulatory changes to accommodate the increased emissions and water usage. Option C. Reject the investment outright due to the potential for exceeding emission and water usage limits, prioritizing the avoidance of any regulatory risk. Option D. Proceed with the investment immediately, focusing on the cost savings and assuming future technological advancements will address any emission or water usage issues. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the investment immediately, focusing on the cost savings and assuming future technological advancements will address any emission or water usage issues. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, JSW, is considering a significant investment in new mining technology. The challenge lies in balancing the potential economic benefits against the environmental and social impacts, particularly in the context of Polish mining regulations and EU environmental directives. A purely cost-driven decision could lead to regulatory noncompliance, reputational damage, and long-term operational risks. Conversely, an overly cautious approach might forego essential technological advancements that could improve safety and efficiency. Professional judgment is required to integrate financial prudence with a comprehensive understanding of legal obligations and stakeholder expectations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a holistic impact assessment that goes beyond immediate financial returns. This entails a thorough evaluation of all potential consequences, economic, environmental, social, and operational, stemming from the new technology. This aligns with the principles of sustainable development and corporate social responsibility, which are increasingly embedded in Polish and EU regulatory frameworks. Specifically, it requires adherence to environmental impact assessment procedures mandated by Polish law e.g. Ustawą o oddziaływaniu na środowisko and relevant EU directives, ensuring that potential negative externalities are identified, mitigated, or compensated for. This approach prioritizes long-term viability and regulatory compliance, safeguarding JSW's license to operate and its reputation. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach focused solely on maximizing short-term financial gains without adequately considering environmental and social externalities would be professionally unacceptable. This would likely violate Polish environmental protection laws and EU directives, leading to potential fines, legal challenges, and operational disruptions. It demonstrates a failure to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and a disregard for the company's broader societal obligations. An approach that prioritizes immediate environmental mitigation at the expense of all economic viability would also be flawed. While environmental protection is crucial, a project must also be economically sustainable to be implemented and maintained. This approach might lead to the rejection of potentially beneficial technologies that could improve safety and efficiency, thereby missing opportunities for responsible resource extraction and economic contribution. It fails to achieve a balanced and pragmatic solution. An approach that relies on outdated or incomplete impact studies, or that selectively presents data to favor a particular outcome, is ethically and legally unsound. This could lead to unforeseen negative consequences that were not properly assessed, resulting in regulatory breaches and potential harm to the environment and local communities. It represents a failure in due diligence and a lack of transparency. Professional reasoning. Professionals at JSW should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive scoping of the project's potential impacts. This involves engaging with relevant stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, local communities, and environmental experts. The next step is to conduct detailed impact assessments, adhering strictly to Polish and EU legal requirements. This assessment should then inform a balanced evaluation of costs and benefits, where environmental and social costs, or benefits, are quantified or qualitatively assessed and integrated into the decision-making matrix alongside financial considerations. The final decision should be justifiable based on this holistic assessment, demonstrating compliance, responsibility, and strategic foresight. Question 6. The investigation demonstrates that Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa is considering a new mining expansion project that may have significant implications for local water resources and biodiversity. Given the potential for substantial environmental effects, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with Polish environmental regulations and responsible project management? Option A. Conduct a limited, internal review of potential impacts, focusing only on immediate operational concerns and assuming minimal long-term environmental consequences. Option B. Initiate a formal environmental impact assessment IA process as stipulated by Polish law, engaging relevant experts and stakeholders. Option C. Proceed with the expansion based on initial internal assessments, deferring any formal environmental review until operational issues arise. Option D. Prioritize the economic benefits of the expansion, addressing environmental concerns only if explicitly mandated by regulatory bodies after project commencement. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal environmental impact assessment IA process as stipulated by Polish law, engaging relevant experts and stakeholders. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa to balance immediate operational needs with long-term environmental stewardship and regulatory compliance. The company must make a judgment call on how to proceed with a potentially impactful project while adhering to Polish environmental law and any relevant EU directives that Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa is subject to. The core challenge lies in interpreting the scope and significance of potential environmental impacts and determining the appropriate level of assessment required by law. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough environmental impact assessment, IA, as mandated by Polish environmental protection legislation, which aligns with EU directives on EIA. This approach is correct because it systematically identifies, predicts, and evaluates the potential environmental consequences of the proposed project. It ensures that all significant impacts, direct and indirect, are considered, and that mitigation measures are developed and implemented. This proactive and comprehensive assessment is a fundamental requirement for responsible project development and demonstrates Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's commitment to legal compliance and environmental protection. It allows for informed decision-making by both the company and regulatory authorities. Proceeding without a formal EIA, despite potential impacts, is an incorrect approach. This failure to conduct a mandatory assessment constitutes a direct violation of Polish environmental law and potentially EU directives. It bypasses the legal requirement for public consultation and expert review, increasing the risk of unforeseen environmental damage and subsequent legal penalties. Adopting a minimal impact assessment based solely on initial internal observations, without a structured, legally compliant process, is also incorrect. This approach is insufficient as it lacks the rigor and objectivity required by law. Internal observations may be subjective and fail to capture the full spectrum of potential environmental effects, such as cumulative impacts or effects on protected species or habitats. Focusing solely on the economic benefits of the project while deferring environmental considerations is fundamentally flawed and incorrect. This prioritizes short-term financial gains over legal obligations and environmental sustainability, creating significant legal and reputational risks for Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. It demonstrates a disregard for the precautionary principle and the legal framework designed to protect the environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying all applicable legal and regulatory requirements, particularly those related to environmental impact assessment. 2. Consulting with environmental experts and legal counsel to interpret these requirements in the context of the specific project. 3. Undertaking a preliminary screening to determine if a full EIA is necessary. 4. If an EIA is required, initiating the process promptly and ensuring it is conducted comprehensively and transparently. 5. Integrating findings and mitigation measures into project planning and execution. Question 7. The analysis reveals that Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa is considering a significant upgrade to its mining equipment that could potentially increase dust emissions and alter water runoff patterns. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Polish regulatory requirements and professional environmental management practices for assessing the impact of such a change? Option A. Proceed with the equipment upgrade and address any environmental concerns that arise after the implementation is complete. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, IA, in line with Polish environmental protection law and relevant EU directives, including public consultation and detailed mitigation planning. Option C. Rely on internal operational assessments to estimate potential environmental impacts and implement ad hoc mitigation measures as needed. Option D. Commission a limited environmental review focusing only on immediate operational costs and benefits, assuming minimal long-term environmental consequences. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, IA, in line with Polish environmental protection law and relevant EU directives, including public consultation and detailed mitigation planning. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa is considering a significant operational change that could impact its environmental footprint. The professional challenge lies in balancing the company's economic objectives with its legal and ethical obligations concerning environmental protection. This requires a thorough understanding of relevant Polish environmental regulations and corporate social responsibility principles. Careful judgment is needed to ensure that any decision is not only commercially viable, but also compliant and sustainable. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, IA, in accordance with Polish law and EU directives applicable to such projects. This process systematically identifies, predicts, and evaluates the potential environmental consequences of the proposed operational change. It also proposes mitigation measures to minimize negative impacts and outlines monitoring plans. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal mandate for impact assessment before undertaking projects with potential environmental consequences, ensuring transparency, public consultation, and informed decision-making, thereby upholding regulatory compliance and ethical environmental stewardship. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the operational change without a formal EIA, relying solely on internal risk assessments that may not adequately capture all potential environmental externalities or comply with legal requirements. This failure to conduct a mandatory EIA constitutes a direct breach of Polish environmental protection law and potentially EU directives, exposing Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa to legal penalties, reputational damage, and the risk of unforeseen environmental harm. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial EIA that focuses only on easily quantifiable impacts, neglecting qualitative or long-term ecological effects. This approach is flawed because it fails to provide a holistic understanding of the project's environmental footprint, potentially leading to inadequate mitigation strategies and non-compliance with the spirit, if not the letter, of environmental legislation. It also undermines the principle of precautionary action in environmental management. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize immediate cost savings over thorough environmental due diligence, assuming that any environmental risks are manageable without formal assessment. This is professionally unacceptable as it disregards the legal framework designed to protect the environment and public health. It demonstrates a lack of corporate responsibility and a failure to integrate environmental considerations into strategic decision-making, which can lead to significant long-term liabilities and operational disruptions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive engagement with regulatory requirements, a commitment to ethical environmental practices, and a structured approach to risk assessment and mitigation. This includes identifying all applicable legal obligations early in the planning phase, seeking expert advice when necessary, and ensuring that environmental considerations are integrated into business strategy rather than treated as an afterthought. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates concerns regarding the potential environmental and social impacts of Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's proposed expansion project. Which approach to conducting the impact assessment best aligns with Polish regulatory requirements and ethical corporate responsibility? Option A. Prioritize the economic benefits of the expansion, focusing the impact assessment primarily on cost savings and revenue projections, with minimal consideration for environmental or social externalities. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that includes comprehensive environmental and social evaluations, actively engages all identified stakeholders throughout the process, and ensures findings are transparently reported in accordance with the Polish environmental protection law and relevant mining regulations. Option C. Dismiss stakeholder concerns as general opposition and proceed with a cursory review of potential impacts, relying on internal assessments without external validation. Option D. Utilize readily available historical data for the impact assessment, assuming current conditions are similar and without conducting new, site-specific environmental or social surveys. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that includes comprehensive environmental and social evaluations, actively engages all identified stakeholders throughout the process, and ensures findings are transparently reported in accordance with the Polish environmental protection law and relevant mining regulations. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, as a publicly listed entity, must navigate the complex landscape of stakeholder expectations and regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate financial pressures of operational efficiency with the long-term implications of environmental stewardship and community relations, all within the strict confines of Polish mining regulations and corporate governance principles. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any impact assessment process is thorough, transparent, and genuinely considers the diverse perspectives of all affected parties. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and inclusive impact assessment that prioritizes stakeholder engagement and adheres strictly to the Polish environmental protection law and relevant mining regulations. This approach is best professional practice because it ensures that Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa fulfills its legal obligations to identify, evaluate, and mitigate potential negative environmental and social consequences of its operations. By actively involving stakeholders, the company demonstrates a commitment to transparency and responsible corporate citizenship, which can foster trust and reduce the likelihood of future disputes or regulatory sanctions. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance, which mandate that companies consider the interests of all stakeholders, not just shareholders. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on economic benefits without adequately assessing environmental and social impacts would fail to comply with the Polish environmental protection law. This law mandates thorough environmental impact assessments for projects that could significantly affect the environment. Such a failure could lead to legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions if environmental concerns are not addressed proactively. Another incorrect approach that dismisses stakeholder concerns as mere opposition without objective evaluation would violate ethical principles of fairness and respect for community rights. While not always explicitly codified in every regulation, the spirit of environmental and social governance requires that legitimate concerns be addressed. Ignoring these concerns can lead to social unrest, protests, and a breakdown of the company's social license to operate, which is crucial for long-term sustainability in the mining sector. A third incorrect approach that relies on outdated or incomplete data for the impact assessment would be professionally negligent and could lead to inaccurate conclusions. This would not only contravene the requirement for robust evidence-based decision-making under Polish law, but also undermine the credibility of the assessment process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly defining the scope of the impact assessment based on regulatory requirements and potential risks. Second, identifying all relevant stakeholders and establishing clear communication channels. Third, gathering comprehensive data from reliable sources, including independent experts where necessary. Fourth, systematically evaluating potential impacts, both positive and negative, across environmental, social, and economic dimensions. Fifth, developing mitigation and enhancement measures. And finally, documenting the entire process transparently and communicating findings to stakeholders and regulatory bodies. Question 9. To address the challenge of ensuring that new mining initiatives at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, JSW, comply with environmental regulations and minimize ecological harm, which of the following approaches best reflects a commitment to responsible operational planning and regulatory adherence? Option A. Prioritize immediate operational efficiency and output, with environmental considerations being a secondary concern addressed only when legally mandated to avoid penalties. Option B. Conduct a thorough and integrated environmental impact assessment, IA, during the initial planning phases of any new mining project or significant operational modification. Option C. Implement cost-saving measures by deferring formal environmental impact studies until potential issues arise, relying on ad hoc solutions. Option D. Focus primarily on achieving production targets, addressing environmental concerns only if they become immediate operational impediments or are flagged by regulatory bodies. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough and integrated environmental impact assessment, IA, during the initial planning phases of any new mining project or significant operational modification. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, JSW, due to the inherent conflict between the need to maintain operational efficiency and the imperative to adhere to stringent environmental regulations. The company faces pressure to meet production targets, which might tempt management to overlook or downplay potential environmental impacts. The challenge lies in balancing economic objectives with legal and ethical responsibilities, ensuring that short-term gains do not lead to long-term environmental damage and regulatory noncompliance. This requires a proactive and integrated approach to impact assessment, rather than a reactive or superficial one. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive and systematic environmental impact assessment, IA, that is integrated into the early stages of project planning for any new mining activity or significant operational change at JSW. This approach aligns with the principles of sustainable development and the regulatory framework governing environmental protection in Poland, which mandates such assessments for projects likely to have significant environmental effects. A thorough EIA would identify potential adverse impacts, propose mitigation measures, and consider alternatives, thereby ensuring that JSW operates within legal boundaries and minimizes its ecological footprint. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate citizenship and regulatory compliance, safeguarding the company from potential fines, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on immediate cost savings by bypassing a formal EIA would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach ignores the legal requirement for such assessments and the potential for unforeseen environmental consequences, which could lead to substantial penalties, remediation costs, and damage to JSW's reputation. Adopting a reactive approach, where environmental concerns are only addressed after an incident or complaint arises, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for preventative measures mandated by environmental law. It suggests a culture that prioritizes problem-solving over proactive risk management, which is contrary to best practices in corporate governance and environmental stewardship. Prioritizing production targets above all else, without adequately considering their environmental implications, represents a failure to integrate environmental considerations into business strategy. This approach risks violating environmental permits, exceeding emission limits, and causing irreversible ecological harm, all of which carry severe legal and financial repercussions for JSW. Professional reasoning. Professionals at JSW should adopt a decision-making framework that embeds environmental impact assessment as a core component of project management and strategic planning. This involves 1. Early identification of potential projects or operational changes requiring an EIA. 2. Engaging qualified environmental experts to conduct thorough assessments. 3. Integrating mitigation and monitoring plans into project design and operational procedures. 4. Regularly reviewing and updating impact assessments as circumstances change. 5. Fostering a corporate culture that values environmental responsibility alongside economic performance, ensuring that all decisions are made with a full understanding of their environmental implications, and in strict adherence to Polish environmental law and regulations. Question 10. The review process indicates that a senior manager at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, responsible for procurement, has a close family member who is a significant shareholder in a supplier company bidding for a large contract. The manager is aware of this relationship and the potential for it to influence their decision-making. What is the most appropriate course of action for this senior manager to take? Option A. Immediately disclose the relationship and potential conflict of interest to the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa Compliance Department and recuse themselves from any decision-making related to the supplier's bid, awaiting further instructions. Option B. Continue to manage the procurement process as usual, but ensure that the final decision is made by a subordinate manager to avoid direct involvement. Option C. Discuss the situation informally with a trusted colleague in a similar role to gauge their opinion on how to proceed, without formal reporting. Option D. Proceed with evaluating the supplier's bid based on merit, assuming their professional integrity will prevent any undue influence, and make a decision without informing anyone. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the relationship and potential conflict of interest to the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa Compliance Department, and recuse themselves from any decision-making related to the supplier's bid, awaiting further instructions. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential conflict of interest scenario within Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, requiring careful navigation to uphold ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing business objectives with the imperative to avoid situations that could compromise integrity or create an unfair advantage. This scenario demands a thorough understanding of internal policies and relevant Polish regulations concerning corporate governance and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the potential conflict to the appropriate internal authority, such as the compliance department or a designated ethics officer, and seeking guidance on how to proceed. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and adherence to established procedures designed to mitigate risks. Polish corporate law and internal Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa codes of conduct typically mandate such disclosure to ensure that decisions are made in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders, free from undue personal influence. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the decision without any disclosure, assuming personal judgment is sufficient. This failure directly contravenes the principles of good corporate governance and ethical business practices, potentially leading to accusations of impropriety, unfair competition, or even legal repercussions under Polish law if the conflict influences a decision to the detriment of the company or other parties. Another incorrect approach is to seek informal advice from colleagues without a formal reporting mechanism. While well-intentioned, this bypasses the established channels for conflict resolution and may not provide the necessary documented assurance of compliance, leaving the individual and the company exposed. Professionals facing such situation should adopt a framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to established policies, and seeking formal guidance. This involves recognizing potential conflicts early, understanding the company's internal reporting procedures, and documenting all communications and decisions related to the matter. When in doubt, erring on the side of caution and seeking explicit approval or direction from the designated authority is always the most prudent course of action. Question 11. What factors determine whether an employee of Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa possessing non-public information about an upcoming significant operational change can legally and ethically engage in personal trading of the company's shares? Option A. The employee's belief that the operational change is positive for the company's long-term prospects, regardless of its immediate market impact. Option B. The employee's adherence to Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's internal trading policies and relevant Polish financial market regulations, prohibiting insider dealing and unlawful disclosure of inside information. Option C. The employee's personal assessment of the likelihood of the information becoming public and the potential for personal profit. Option D. The employee's intention to only trade a small number of shares to minimize potential scrutiny. Correct answer is C. The employee's personal assessment of the likelihood of the information becoming public and the potential for personal profit. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa due to the inherent conflict between personal financial interests and the company's fiduciary duties. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for insider information to influence investment decisions, which can lead to unfair market advantages and erode public trust in the integrity of financial markets. Adherence to strict regulatory frameworks is paramount to prevent market abuse and maintain a level playing field for all investors. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's internal policies and relevant Polish financial market regulations concerning the handling of inside information. This means refraining from trading securities of the company or any related entities while in possession of such information, and reporting any potential conflicts of interest to the designated compliance officer. This approach is justified by Article 17 of the Regulation (EU) No. 596/2014 on market abuse (MAR), which prohibits the disclosure of inside information to any third party, except where such disclosure is made in the normal exercise of employment, a profession or duties, and even then, the recipient must be made aware of the information's confidential nature. Furthermore, Polish law, implementing EU directives, imposes strict obligations on individuals within listed companies to prevent market manipulation and insider dealing. By following this, the employee upholds their ethical duty to the company and its stakeholders and avoids severe legal and reputational consequences. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investment based on the personal belief that the information is not yet widely known or that the potential profit outweighs the risk of detection. This is a direct violation of market abuse regulations, as it constitutes insider dealing. The regulatory failure lies in disregarding the prohibition against using inside information for personal gain, regardless of the perceived likelihood of discovery. Another incorrect approach would be to disclose the information to a close friend or family member with the intention of them making the trade, while the employee themselves refrains. This is also a violation, as it constitutes unlawful disclosure of inside information, making the employee complicit in market abuse. The ethical failure here is the attempt to circumvent regulations through indirect means, undermining the principle of fair markets. A further incorrect approach would be to ignore the information entirely and continue with unrelated personal investments without considering the potential impact or the company's disclosure obligations. While seemingly passive, this approach fails to acknowledge the responsibility that comes with possessing potentially market-moving information, and could still lead to accusations of negligence if the information later becomes public and the employee's inaction is scrutinized. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's compliance policies and relevant financial regulations. When faced with information that could be considered inside information, the professional should immediately assess its nature and potential impact. If there is any doubt, the safest and most compliant course of action is to err on the side of caution, refrain from any trading activity related to the information, and consult with the company's compliance department or legal counsel. Transparency and proactive communication with the compliance function are key to navigating such ethically and legally sensitive situations. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that a compliance officer at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa has become aware of potential policy violations by a close personal friend who is also a senior manager within the company. The compliance officer is considering how to proceed with addressing these allegations. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound and ethically compliant course of action for the compliance officer? Option A. Dismiss the allegations without further inquiry, given the close personal relationship with the senior manager, to avoid potential personal discomfort and workplace disruption. Option B. Assign a junior member of the compliance team, who is aware of the relationship but not directly involved, to conduct a preliminary review and report back to the compliance officer for a final decision. Option C. Immediately initiate a formal, documented investigation process, ensuring that the investigation is conducted by an independent party or a team that has no personal or professional ties to the senior manager in question, and document all steps taken. Option D. Conduct a brief, informal conversation with the senior manager to gauge their perspective, and then make a decision based on that conversation and personal judgment. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a formal, documented investigation process, ensuring that the investigation is conducted by an independent party or a team that has no personal or professional ties to the senior manager in question, and document all steps taken. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's compliance officer to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure adherence to internal policies and relevant Polish regulations concerning employee conduct and reporting. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation with the personal relationship involved, which could compromise objectivity. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the investigation process and maintain trust within the organization. The correct approach involves initiating a formal, documented investigation process that clearly delineates roles and responsibilities, ensuring impartiality. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the potential conflict of interest by assigning the investigation to an independent party or a team without direct personal ties to the employee in question. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct, which mandate that investigations be conducted fairly and without bias. Specifically, Polish corporate law and internal Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa policies would likely require such a structured and objective approach to maintain accountability and prevent undue influence. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the allegations outright due to the personal relationship. This is professionally unacceptable, as it bypasses the necessary due diligence and investigation, potentially allowing misconduct to go unaddressed and violating the company's commitment to a safe and ethical workplace. It also demonstrates a failure to uphold the principles of fairness and due process. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial, informal inquiry. This is flawed because it lacks the rigor and documentation necessary for a credible investigation. It risks overlooking crucial evidence, failing to establish facts definitively, and leaving the company vulnerable to legal or reputational damage. Such an approach undermines the seriousness of the allegations and the company's internal control mechanisms. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to delegate the investigation to a subordinate who is also aware of the personal relationship, but not directly involved. While seemingly an attempt to distance the compliance officer, this still carries a risk of indirect influence or perceived bias, as the subordinate might feel pressure to align with the compliance officer's informal views. This approach fails to guarantee the necessary independence and objectivity required for a truly impartial investigation. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying potential conflicts of interest. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. 3. Establishing a clear documented investigation protocol. 4. Ensuring impartiality and objectivity in the investigation team. 5. Maintaining confidentiality and due process. 6. Documenting all findings and actions thoroughly. Question 13. The monitoring system demonstrates an anomaly in the ventilation flow rate within a specific section of the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa mine. This deviation, while not immediately causing visible distress to personnel, is outside the predefined safe operating parameters. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the employee operating in that area? Option A. Inform a colleague about the anomaly and collectively decide on the best course of action. Option B. Attempt to adjust the ventilation controls to bring the flow rate back within the predefined parameters without reporting. Option C. Immediately cease the specific operation in that section and report the anomaly through the designated safety incident reporting channel. Option D. Continue operations but closely observe the situation for any worsening signs. The correct answer is D. Continue operations but closely observe the situation for any worsening signs. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa due to the potential conflict between operational efficiency and the strict adherence to safety regulations. The monitoring system's alert signifies a deviation that, if not addressed promptly and correctly, could lead to serious safety breaches, potentially impacting both personnel and the company's compliance status. Careful judgment is required to balance the immediate need for production with the paramount importance of safety protocols. The correct approach involves immediately halting the specific operation flagged by the monitoring system and initiating the established safety incident reporting procedure. This aligns with the fundamental principles of occupational safety and health regulation, which prioritize the prevention of harm. By stopping the operation, the employee acts proactively to mitigate any immediate risks. Subsequently, following the reporting procedure ensures that the incident is documented, investigated, and addressed by the appropriate safety personnel, thereby upholding the company's commitment to a safe working environment and regulatory compliance. This systematic approach is crucial for maintaining a culture of safety and preventing future occurrences. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the alert or to attempt a quick, unauthorized fix without following the proper reporting channels. Ignoring the alert represents a direct violation of safety protocols and a failure to uphold the duty of care owed to oneself and colleagues. Attempting an unauthorized fix, even with good intentions, bypasses the established safety review process. This could lead to the underlying issue not being properly identified or resolved, potentially masking a more significant problem and creating a false sense of security. Both actions undermine the integrity of the safety management system and expose Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa to regulatory penalties and reputational damage. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's safety policies and regulatory obligations. When an alert is triggered, the immediate priority is to assess the potential risk. If there is any doubt about safety, the default action should be to cease operations. This should then be followed by strict adherence to the incident reporting and investigation procedures. Professionals must cultivate a mindset where safety is never compromised for expediency, and where all deviations from standard operating procedures are treated with appropriate seriousness. Question 14. The monitoring system demonstrates a slight, temporary decrease in ventilation airflow in a specific section of the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa mine, below the legally mandated minimum, but not yet at a critical level. A senior supervisor suggests a minor, undocumented adjustment to a ventilation fan setting to immediately rectify the airflow, arguing it will prevent a more significant disruption later and is a common practice among experienced personnel. What is the most appropriate course of action for a compliance officer to recommend? Option A. Authorize the supervisor to make the adjustment, emphasizing that the primary goal is to maintain operational continuity and that the compliance department will review the situation retrospectively. Option B. Recommend that the supervisor immediately cease operations in that section until the ventilation system can be brought back to full compliance through official channels and documented procedures. Option C. Advise the supervisor that the proposed adjustment can be made immediately as it is a minor deviation and a common practice, with a note to document it later. Option D. Suggest that the supervisor proceed with the adjustment and then submit a formal request for a temporary operational deviation, citing the need for immediate airflow correction. The correct answer is C. Advise the supervisor that the proposed adjustment can be made immediately as it is a minor deviation and a common practice, with a note to document it later. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between operational efficiency and the strict adherence to Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's internal compliance policies, which are themselves derived from Polish mining safety regulations. The core difficulty lies in interpreting and applying these regulations when faced with a situation that deviates from standard operating procedures, but might offer a perceived short-term benefit. The need for careful judgment stems from the absolute priority placed on safety and regulatory compliance, where any deviation, even if seemingly minor or well-intentioned, can have significant legal and ethical repercussions. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the relevant Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa internal procedures and applicable Polish mining safety laws. This approach prioritizes understanding the precise requirements and limitations outlined in these documents before making any decision. Specifically, necessitates consulting the company's documented safety protocols and any relevant decrees or ordinances from the Polish Ministry of Energy or the state mining authority concerning ventilation in underground mines. The regulatory justification lies in the principle of strict adherence to established safety standards, which are designed to prevent accidents and protect worker health. Ethically, this demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and responsible management, ensuring that decisions are not made impulsively, but are grounded in established safety frameworks. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the proposed modification without explicit authorization or a clear understanding of its compliance status. This could involve assuming that the proposed change is acceptable because it is suggested by an experienced supervisor or because it appears to address a minor operational bottleneck. The regulatory failure here is the bypass of established approval processes and the potential violation of specific ventilation requirements mandated by Polish law, which might stipulate precise airflow rates, monitoring frequencies, or equipment specifications. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a disregard for established procedures and a failure to uphold the duty of care owed to employees, potentially exposing them to increased risks. Another incorrect approach would be to implement the change based on a verbal agreement or informal understanding, without documenting the decision or seeking formal approval. This creates a significant compliance risk, as there would be no auditable trail to demonstrate adherence to regulations. The regulatory failure is the lack of formal record keeping and the absence of a documented risk assessment, which are typically required for any deviation from standard operating procedures in a regulated industry like mining. Ethically, this approach fosters a culture of informality that can undermine the seriousness of safety protocols and create ambiguity regarding accountability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the deviation. Clearly recognize when a situation requires a departure from standard operating procedures. 2. Consult relevant documentation. Immediately refer to internal company policies, procedures, and applicable external regulations, in this case, Polish mining safety laws. 3. Seek clarification and authorization. If the documentation is unclear or the situation is novel, consult with the appropriate compliance officers, safety managers, or legal counsel within Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. 4. Document all decisions. Ensure that any decision, especially one involving a deviation, is thoroughly documented, including the rationale, approvals, and any risk assessments conducted. 5. Prioritize safety and compliance. Always make safety and regulatory compliance the absolute priority, even if it means delaying an operation or incurring additional costs. Question 15. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent, albeit minor, deviation from the prescribed safety interlock sequence during the operation of a critical piece of underground mining equipment at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. The deviation does not appear to be causing immediate operational failure, but suggests a potential vulnerability in the safety system. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for an employee observing this? Option A. Continue monitoring the deviation and document it for the next scheduled maintenance report, assuming it is within acceptable operational tolerances. Option B. Inform colleagues working nearby about the observed deviation and collectively decide on the best course of action. Option C. Attempt to manually override the safety interlock to restore the sequence to its intended state, as this will improve operational efficiency. Option D. Immediately cease the operation of the equipment and report the deviation to the shift supervisor and the designated safety officer. Correct answer is A. Continue monitoring the deviation and document it for the next scheduled maintenance report, assuming it is within acceptable operational tolerances. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa due to the potential conflict between operational efficiency and the strict adherence to safety regulations. Monitoring systems' indication of a deviation from standard operating procedures, particularly concerning safety protocols, requires immediate and careful judgment to prevent potential harm to personnel or damage to equipment. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need to address the observed deviation promptly with the requirement to follow established reporting and corrective action procedures, as mandated by Polish mining law and internal company policies. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the observed deviation to the designated supervisor or safety officer, as per Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's internal safety protocols and the overarching requirements of Polish mining safety legislation. This ensures that the issue is formally documented and addressed by individuals with the authority and expertise to investigate, implement corrective actions, and ensure compliance with regulations such as those outlined in the Polish mining law, Prawo geologiczne I Górnicze, and related ordinances concerning mine safety. This approach prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance, which are absolute priorities in the mining industry. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the deviation, assuming it is a minor or temporary issue. This failure to report and address a potential safety breach directly violates the duty of care mandated by mining regulations and company policy, potentially leading to accidents and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to rectify the deviation independently without proper authorization or expertise. This bypasses established safety procedures and could exacerbate the problem or introduce new risks, again contravening regulatory requirements for controlled operational changes and incident management. Finally, delaying the reporting of the deviation to await further information or confirmation without an interim report is also an unacceptable approach, as it allows a potential hazard to persist unchecked, violating the principle of immediate risk mitigation. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and compliance. This involves 1. Recognizing and understanding the potential risk indicated by the monitoring system. 2. Immediately consulting relevant company policies and regulatory requirements. 3. Promptly reporting the observed deviation through the established channels to the appropriate personnel. 4. Cooperating fully with any subsequent investigation and corrective actions. This systematic approach ensures that all actions taken are in line with legal obligations and ethical responsibilities, safeguarding both personnel and the company. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent, albeit minor, deviation in atmospheric pressure readings within a specific section of the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa mine. This deviation has been observed over the past 48 hours and falls within the acceptable tolerance range specified in the operational manual, but it is outside the historical baseline for that particular area. What is the most appropriate course of action for a shift supervisor at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa? Option A. Immediately initiate a full evacuation of the affected mine section and halt all operations pending a comprehensive safety inspection. Option B. Record the deviation, consult the mine's safety engineer for an assessment of potential risks, and follow their guidance on further investigation or action. Option C. Document the deviation in the daily log. Continue standard operations and schedule a routine sensor calibration for the next maintenance cycle. Option D. Adjust the operational parameters of nearby equipment to compensate for the observed pressure change, assuming it is a minor environmental fluctuation. The correct answer is C. Document the deviation in the daily log, continue standard operations, and schedule a routine sensor calibration for the next maintenance cycle. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa due to the potential conflict between operational efficiency and the strict adherence to safety regulations. The monitoring system's findings, if not addressed promptly and correctly, could lead to serious safety breaches, regulatory noncompliance, and potential harm to personnel or the environment. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting the data accurately and taking appropriate, compliant action within the established legal and operational framework of Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation of the anomaly, cross-referencing with established operational procedures and relevant Polish mining safety regulations. This approach prioritizes safety and compliance by ensuring that any deviation from normal operating parameters is understood in its full context and addressed according to prescribed protocols. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of proactive risk management and the legal obligation to maintain a safe working environment, as mandated by Polish mining law and internal Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa safety policies. This methodical process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and prioritize the well-being of workers and the integrity of operations. An incorrect approach of ignoring the anomaly or making assumptions without proper investigation is a direct violation of safety protocols and potentially Polish mining legislation. Such actions demonstrate a disregard for established procedures and a failure to exercise due diligence, which can have severe legal and ethical consequences. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately shutting down operations without a preliminary assessment, might be overly cautious and disruptive, potentially leading to unnecessary production losses and operational chaos if the anomaly is minor or easily rectifiable. This could also be seen as a failure to apply reasoned judgment and follow established escalation procedures. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with accurate data interpretation, followed by a systematic review of relevant regulations and internal policies. If an anomaly is detected, the process should involve documenting the observation, consulting relevant technical experts and safety officers, and initiating a formal investigation. Actions taken should be proportionate to the identified risk and always in compliance with the law and company procedures. This structured approach ensures accountability, transparency, and the highest standards of safety and operational integrity. Question 17. The performance metrics show a significant decrease in the number of reported safety incidents and near misses at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa over the last 3 months. Considering the company's commitment to maintaining the highest safety standards as mandated by Polish mining regulations, what is the most appropriate initial course of action for the safety management team? Option A. Focus solely on analyzing the statistical data to confirm the trend and prepare a report for senior management highlighting the positive safety trend. Option B. Issue a company-wide memo congratulating employees on the apparent improvement in safety and emphasizing the success of current safety protocols. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the safety reporting procedures. Interview a cross-section of employees regarding their experiences and perceptions of the reporting process, and analyze the types of incidents that were previously reported to identify any patterns or anomalies. Option D. Immediately implement a new incentive program to reward employees for reporting safety concerns, assuming the decrease is due to a lack of proactive reporting. Correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the safety reporting procedures. Interview a cross-section of employees regarding their experiences and perceptions of the reporting process, and analyze the types of incidents that were previously reported to identify any patterns or anomalies. Explanation. The performance metrics show a significant decline in safety incident reporting within Jastrzebska Spolka, Weglowa's mining operations over the past quarter. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of regulatory compliance, ethical obligations, and the potential for systemic issues to be masked by apparent improvements. A decline in reported incidents could indicate genuine improvements in safety practices, but it could also signal a breakdown in the reporting culture, where employees feel discouraged or fear repercussions for reporting near misses or minor accidents. This creates a critical need for careful judgment to distinguish between actual safety enhancements and a potentially dangerous underreporting phenomenon. The correct approach involves a comprehensive investigation that goes beyond surface-level data. It requires engaging with employees at all levels, reviewing existing safety protocols for clarity and effectiveness, and assessing the internal communication channels regarding safety. This approach aligns with the fundamental principles of occupational health and safety regulations, which mandate not only the prevention of accidents, but also the establishment of robust systems for identifying, reporting, and learning from all safety-related events, including near misses. Ethically, it upholds the company's responsibility to provide a safe working environment and to foster a culture where safety concerns are openly addressed. An incorrect approach would be to solely attribute the decline in reported incidents to successful safety initiatives without further scrutiny. This fails to acknowledge the possibility of a compromised reporting culture. Such an approach would violate regulatory requirements that emphasize proactive risk identification and the importance of a comprehensive understanding of safety performance, not just reported outcomes. Another incorrect approach would be to implement punitive measures for any perceived lack of reporting, which would actively discourage future reporting and create a climate of fear, directly contravening the spirit and letter of safety legislation and ethical workplace practices. A third incorrect approach might be to focus solely on statistical anomalies without considering the qualitative aspects of safety culture, such as employee morale and trust in management's commitment to safety. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a holistic view of safety. This involves 1. Data interpretation with context, analyzing performance metrics not in isolation but in conjunction with qualitative data and operational realities. 2. Root cause analysis, investigating the underlying reasons for observed trends, considering both systemic and cultural factors. 3. Stakeholder engagement, actively involving employees, safety officers, and management in the assessment and improvement process. 4. Proactive risk management, focusing on preventing incidents by addressing potential hazards and fostering a strong safety culture, rather than merely reacting to reported events. Question 18. The control framework reveals a minor, recurring discrepancy in the daily output reporting for a specific mining section at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. While the deviation does not immediately impact overall production targets or pose a safety risk, it deviates from the documented standard operating procedure for data entry. An employee notices this discrepancy and is aware of the pressure to maintain high daily output figures. What is the most appropriate course of action according to the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's internal control framework and relevant Polish regulatory guidelines for corporate reporting? Option A. Ignore the discrepancy as it is minor and does not affect the overall production targets, focusing instead on ensuring the section meets its daily output goals. Option B. Discuss the discrepancy informally with a colleague to gauge their opinion on whether it warrants reporting, deferring formal action until a consensus is reached. Option C. Attempt to manually adjust the reporting figures to align with the expected output without formally documenting the adjustment or the original discrepancy. Option D. Document the discrepancy in the daily log and immediately report it through the established internal channels for control deficiencies, initiating the process for investigation and potential remediation. The correct answer is D. Document the discrepancy in the daily log and immediately report it through the established internal channels for control deficiencies, initiating the process for investigation and potential remediation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts between operational efficiency and the stringent reporting requirements mandated by the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's internal control framework, which is designed to ensure compliance with relevant Polish mining regulations and corporate governance standards. The pressure to meet production targets can create an incentive to overlook or downplay minor deviations, but adherence to the control framework is paramount for maintaining transparency, accountability, and legal compliance. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing pressures. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the identified deviation, regardless of its perceived minor nature, and initiating the established internal reporting procedure for control deficiencies. This aligns with the fundamental principles of robust internal control systems, which emphasize timely identification, assessment, and remediation of any weaknesses. Specifically, this approach adheres to the spirit and letter of regulations governing corporate reporting and internal audit functions within Polish enterprises, requiring full disclosure of operational anomalies that could impact financial reporting or regulatory compliance. It upholds ethical obligations to stakeholders by ensuring accurate and complete information flow. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking the deviation due to its perceived insignificance fails to recognize that even minor control weaknesses can escalate or indicate systemic issues. This bypasses the established reporting channels, violating the integrity of the control framework and potentially leading to non-compliance with Polish corporate governance laws that mandate accurate record-keeping and reporting. Another incorrect approach, which involves attempting to rectify the deviation without formal documentation and reporting, undermines the audit trail and prevents proper oversight and analysis of control effectiveness. This can lead to a false sense of security and hinder the identification of root causes, thereby violating the principles of good corporate governance and potentially contravening specific provisions related to internal control effectiveness in Polish company law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established control procedures and regulatory mandates over short-term operational pressures. This involves understanding the purpose of each control, diligently executing reporting responsibilities, and seeking clarification from supervisors or internal audit when in doubt. The process should involve 1. Identifying the deviation, 2. Assessing its potential impact against the control framework's objectives, 3. Following the prescribed reporting protocol, and 4. Cooperating with any subsequent investigation or remediation efforts. Question 19. Strategic planning requires Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa to consider its upcoming expansion into new mining territories. Given the company's operational history and the sensitive ecological zones surrounding these potential sites, which of the following approaches best balances strategic growth with regulatory compliance and environmental responsibility? Option A. Implement a minimal compliance strategy, meeting only the most basic legal requirements for environmental protection and deferring any further environmental considerations until significant operational issues or public outcry emerge. Option B. Focus solely on the economic viability and operational efficiency of the expansion, assuming that any environmental regulations can be managed through lobbying efforts or by seeking waivers after the project is underway. Option C. Prioritize securing necessary permits and licenses for expansion only after the strategic plan is finalized and initial investments are made, addressing any environmental concerns as they arise during the operational phase. Option D. Conduct comprehensive environmental impact assessments and engage in early consultations with relevant environmental regulatory bodies to integrate mitigation strategies into the strategic plan before final approval and investment. The correct answer is C. Prioritize securing necessary permits and licenses for expansion only after the strategic plan is finalized and initial investments are made, addressing any environmental concerns as they arise during the operational phase. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa's management due to the inherent tension between achieving strategic growth objectives and adhering to stringent environmental regulations. The company's expansion plans, while potentially beneficial for its financial performance and market position, must be carefully balanced against its legal obligations to minimize environmental impact. Failure to do so could result in significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The core of the challenge lies in integrating environmental considerations seamlessly into the strategic planning process, rather than treating them as an afterthought or an obstacle. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with environmental regulatory bodies and conducting thorough environmental impact assessments as an integral part of the strategic planning phase. This demonstrates a commitment to compliance and responsible corporate citizenship. Specifically, this approach aligns with the principles of sustainable development and the precautionary principle often embedded within environmental legislation. By seeking early consultation and incorporating mitigation measures identified through assessments, Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa can ensure its expansion plans are both viable and legally sound, thereby avoiding future conflicts and potential liabilities. This proactive stance fosters trust with regulators and stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with expansion plans without adequately considering or addressing potential environmental impacts, assuming that regulatory hurdles can be overcome later. This demonstrates a disregard for environmental laws and regulations, which could lead to fines, injunctions, or even the suspension of operations. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize short-term financial gains over long-term environmental sustainability, viewing environmental compliance as a cost to be minimized rather than a fundamental requirement. This can result in significant reputational damage and alienate environmentally conscious investors and customers. Finally, attempting to circumvent or misinterpret environmental regulations to facilitate expansion is unethical and illegal, exposing the company to severe legal repercussions and undermining its integrity. Professionals tasked with strategic planning should adopt a framework that integrates legal and ethical considerations from the outset. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory frameworks and their implications for the proposed strategy. 2. Conducting thorough due diligence, including environmental impact assessments, to understand potential risks and liabilities. 3. Engaging in open and transparent communication with regulatory authorities and stakeholders. 4. Developing contingency plans to address unforeseen environmental challenges. 5. Ensuring that strategic decisions are aligned with both business objectives and legal/ethical obligations. Question 20. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern in the access logs for a critical operational database at Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, indicating multiple unauthorized login attempts from an external IP address that does not correspond to any known vendor or partner. Option A. Immediately report the anomaly to the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa compliance officer and the head of IT security for investigation and appropriate action. Option B. Continue monitoring the situation for a few more days to see if the pattern repeats before taking any action. Option C. Discuss the anomaly with a colleague in the operations department to gauge their opinion on its significance. Option D. Attempt to block the external IP address from the firewall without informing any other department. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the anomaly to the Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa compliance officer and the head of IT security for investigation and appropriate action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between operational efficiency and the strict adherence to regulatory requirements concerning the handling of sensitive information within Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa. The need to maintain production while ensuring compliance demands careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the applicable legal and ethical frameworks. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the observed anomaly to the designated compliance officer or department. This is the most appropriate professional response because it directly addresses the potential breach of regulatory obligations. Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa, like any entity operating under Polish law, is subject to regulations governing data protection and operational integrity. Prompt escalation ensures that the company's internal control mechanisms are activated, allowing for a formal investigation and remediation in accordance with legal mandates. This proactive step demonstrates a commitment to compliance and minimizes potential legal repercussions or reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the anomaly, assuming it is a minor technical glitch. This failure to act constitutes a dereliction of duty and a potential violation of regulatory oversight requirements. It could lead to the continuation of a non-compliant practice, exposing Jastrzebska Spolka Weglowa to significant penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to resolve the issue independently without involving the appropriate compliance personnel. This bypasses established protocols and could result in an inadequate or improper fix, potentially exacerbating the problem or creating new compliance risks. Furthermore, it undermines the authority and function of the compliance department. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of reporting lines and compliance procedures. When an anomaly is detected that could indicate a regulatory breach, the immediate priority is to follow established protocols for reporting and investigation. This typically involves documenting the observation and escalating it to the relevant authority within the organization, such as a compliance officer, legal counsel, or internal audit. The focus should always be on ensuring transparency, accountability, and adherence to the law.